On today's show, I have some quick NBA picks for Friday's games. Later, a special interview with Ben Lewis of Matchpoint Canada and Sportsnet to preview the WTA Finals, which start on Monday. Courts in session. Once again, we have an 11-game slot of games on a Friday night here in the NBA. Here are three of my quick picks. The Cleveland Cavaliers and the Boston Celtics are both 3-1 to start the season. The Cavs have had a relatively easier schedule than the Celtics, but both teams are missing some important players due to injury. With the wall of bigs in Cleveland, it'll be a low-scoring affair. Let's take the under on 216.5 total points. The 76ers and the Raptors meet again after a Raptors win on Wednesday night. The 76ers are off to a rough start to the season, posting a 1-4 start. The transition defense isn't where they want it to be, and you can't do that against one of the best transition teams in the NBA in the Toronto Raptors. Let's smash that Raptors money line. Are the Utah Jazz actually good? The answer is yes. Even so, I think their matchup with the Denver Nuggets tonight will be a close one. Let's take the Jazz to cover the plus 8-point spread tonight. Good luck with your NBA picks tonight, and coming up next, we shift gears to the WTA Finals with a special interview with Tennis Canada's Ben Lewis. Welcome back into the studio. I'm Crina Mustafa, joined by Ben Lewis. He is one of the co-hosts of Matchpoint Canada over at Tennis Canada, and he writes for Sportsnet as well. Pretty much as involved in the world of tennis as someone can be. So I thought it's the perfect reason to have you on to preview the WTA Finals, which are happening this Monday. Ben, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. A long tennis season is finally coming to a close. Like it's the longest of any sport, I feel, a calendar year. But the WTA Finals starting is awesome. You get like the top 8 from the season, and we sort of find out who will reign supreme. It's not necessarily like an evaluation of the full year, but it's a great final end of year tournament, right?
Yeah, and it's I like that you said that, because we think about last year's winner on singles, which was Garbine Muguruza, and just think she's not in the top 8 this year. And so just it's kind of crazy to think how a year can change and how we kind of evaluate how a player's season does go throughout the year.
Yeah, I always say in tennis, we have to have very short-term memory, and we generally do, because so much changes. You look at even early winners of the season, they might not be winning towards the end of the season. In the case last year, Garbine Muguruza won the WTA Finals. She's had a very tough 2022. So now we have our top 8, and I'm kind of just keen on who's going to be in that best form. Sometimes with these final tournaments, fatigue can play a role, so who's physically fresh at this stage and is going to have the energy to push through and win one more big tournament.
Yeah, so if we look at the singles field by ranking, Iga, of course, is at number 1. I don't think anybody could overtake her this year with the years she's had. Even thinking about the fact that, like, just as a random aside, but Ashley Barty retired earlier this year after winning the Australian Open, so it's kind of like, well, this has been a very long year. But then we have Ons Jabeur at number 2, which is absolutely fantastic, followed by Pegula, who just won in Guadalajara. We have Coco, Maria Sakkari, who just snuck in, Caroline Garcia, Sabalenka, and Kasatkina, and that kind of completes the top 8. I want to know, who's your prediction to win out of these 8?
I mean, the very safe prediction is obviously the world number 1, and not just because the number 1 is attached to her name, but like Iga Swiatek has just been a different class and just on a different planet this season. I think if you look at the numbers and what she's accomplished, 37-match winning streak, 2 slams, French Open, winning the US Open. I think this is probably the best women's season we've seen since Serena Williams 2015 when she won 3 slams. So for me, Iga's been a cut above. She's finished the season strong as well, winning again another title. So she's the safe prediction. I would say the wild card prediction right now that I'm looking at is American Jessica Pegula.
Oh my God, we're twinning. See, that's why I had him on the show today. Like, we have the same pick. I was like, Pegula's my dark horse as well. I think she just won Guadalajara. I think she has the momentum if you're looking at this group. You could argue also Coco has a bit of that momentum as well, but she could be a really sneaky pick to win this whole thing.
She's really good on hard courts. She plays a powerful, quick game. I think the one concern is, can she beat Iga? She's 0-4 against Iga this season, so that's been a really tough matchup for her. She got closer in San Diego a few weeks ago, finally took a set. But that's the big challenge, I think, for Pegula. Can she beat Iga? Same thing with Coco Gauff, who lost to her recently, lost to her in the finals at the French Open. Ons Jabeur might be feeling that same thing. She lost in the finals to her at the US Open. So the question is, which of these, 7 other players could beat Iga Swiatek? And do you go a little off the board and say like Caroline Garcia of France, who's had a really hot season, made the semis of the US Open and played amazing in the summertime?
Yeah, this might be a weird take, but I feel like if anybody runs into Iga before the final, like any of those favorites, they might have a better chance than if they face her in the final of this tournament, just because we even saw at the US Open where Iga's tennis was kind of rocky on the way to that US Open final, which again speaks to how great she is, the fact that she could play her best tennis in the final and not on the way there. But then in the final, it just seems like Iga Swiatek turns on like a whole different level of tennis that just becomes so hard to play against. And so yeah, I gotta go with you. The safe bet is definitely Iga. But Pegula could be in there. Honestly, it's a really good field. I'm very interested to see about Garcia because some news did come out that her and her coach split up literally just 4 days before the WTA finals were set to start. So that'll be interesting considering she's played pretty well this year.
Yeah, very unusual timing, I think, on splitting with a full-time coach just before the last tournament of the season, which tells me maybe that's a fractured relationship. Unfortunate maybe for Garcia. We'll see if that bothers her at all. I want to give credit to Aryna Sabalenka, by the way, to get to the top 8 under the circumstances that she did so.
Yeah.
Didn't play Wimbledon, neither did Daria Kasatkina, because Russians and Belarusians obviously couldn't compete. But Sabalenka, I think, closed her season out a little better. She made the semifinals of the US Open. And I want to say, I haven't looked at the history of this, but I don't know if there's another player who's had a full season with 400 double faults and finished in the top 8 and qualified for the end of year tour finals. That's incredible.
I know. My God, I know exactly what you're talking about. And you can tell, like, you can feel her frustration too. Like, that's an insane statistic.
Yeah,
like,
so
really.
I think that's, in a way, that's a testament to how good her game is from the back of the court to withstand that many double faults, that many free points you're handing to your opponent, and still get over 30 wins this season, make a couple finals, semis of the US Open. So she hasn't played her best tennis at all, but if she turns it on, cleans up the doubles, she's a threat. She has enough power from the back of the court to beat anybody.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's like I look at this list and I feel like I can talk myself out of everybody to win
Talk
this whole
yourself out
thing.
of or into anybody. Sure.
Exactly, 100%. Let's move on to the doubles because I do want to give a bit of love to them. We have our Canadian Gabby Dabrowski playing in doubles with her partner Juliana. And, the Czechs are the #1 seed. They've won 3 of the 4 slams this year.
Yeah.
They won the WTA finals last year. They're the defending champs. Do you think they're gonna take this one, or is somebody gonna challenge them?
I think if Coco Gauff and Jessica Pegula, if fatigue doesn't play a role, which I already mentioned can play a role at this stage of the season, they have enough of a firepower and chemistry in that combination, which can disrupt and bother a lot of teams. Incredible achievement, I think, for Coco Gauff to be world #1 in doubles this season. She's top 5 in singles and doubles at her age. That's just an extraordinary achievement. She's obviously great friends with Pegula, which helps so much. So for me, they're a team that could maybe disrupt the Krejcikova-Siniakova powerhouse. But as you said, 3 of 4 slams. Krejcikova, we forget she's a phenomenal singles player as well. I mean, she's not in the top 8 right now, but she's had a bit of a resurgence in singles at the end of the year. So I would think that would lead in and blend into confidence when you play doubles. They are certainly the best team of the bunch, without a doubt. We should give credit to Ottawa's Gabriela Dabrowski, though. To be back in the top 8 is amazing. And she has shown versatility because she's good with different players. She's won with Juliana Olmos, and we saw her winning last year some big titles, including in Montreal with Luisa Stefani. So that shows you just how versatile and strong she is on the court.
100%. I'm so excited for all of these players to play. I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
So in this singles list that I previously mentioned, do you think any of them could be considered for most improved player at the end of the year?
So top 8 most improved player, I think you're looking at Caroline Garcia would be one who could potentially fit that mold, because this is the best tennis we've seen from her in about 4 years' time, since she was a former top 5 player and now she's playing like it again. And she's one of the veterans of that group. So I would point to her. I certainly think she'll be in contention. I mean, we saw the examples last year, like Krejcikova, Badosa, sort of improved players. Badosa coming from, 70 something ranked to get to the top 8. Garcia didn't come quite as far in terms of getting her ranking back up, but to do so the way she did, the number of matches she won, I think she had a stretch going 22-3 between winning a couple tournaments, getting to the semis of the U.S. Open, that she's definitely in contention for that award.
Yeah, for sure. Even winning Cincy this year was
That's right.
huge for her, I feel like. And when we were both in Toronto for the National Bank Open, and I remember just sitting and watching her practice, like how hard she hits the ball and the angles that she hits the ball. It's like, it's crazy to watch. I really like that pick. That's a good one. I think from this list also, it's really hard for me to lean to make a case for Coco, because it feels like she's just always been awesome, but I feel like there still is a case for her to be most improved. I feel like she just gets better every year.
That's true. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, like incremental improvements for Coco Gauff. And I like that sort of steady progression from players when we don't. I mean, I don't blame someone for having ups and downs in their career, but I think for Coco, since she's been 16 years old, getting to this stage now, I think 19, just steadily progressing in the rankings and showing that she can play singles and doubles. It's an unusual year for her too, because she hasn't won a singles title. But I think it speaks volumes that you're sort of at the end of tournaments consistently on a week-to-week basis, always putting yourself in contention.
For sure, yeah, because it's so interesting to look at these young players too. Like some of them have had success right away, whether that was like Emma Raducanu, like even Layla, you could argue, making the U.S. Open final last year too. And so where with Coco, it's kind of been, like you said, like that incremental steady growth. So I'm very excited for Coco's future, and I could see her maybe a different kind of most improved player, like a most improved over time, steady.
Sure.
That kind of award could be given to her. And then my last question for you is, which Canadian between Bianca Andreescu and Leylah Fernandez, which one of them has a better chance of making the WTA finals next year?
This is a pretty fascinating question, because they both missed blocks of time this season. For Bianca, it was kind of, I think, a mental break basically from the sport, and she didn't start her season until on the clay sort of early May. And so she basically missed half a year almost. Leylah, Annie Fernandez missed a portion of the year for different reasons. Obviously the foot injury at Roland Garros, timing wise, which was brutal because she had been playing so great there and made the quarterfinals. So Bianca's going to have nothing to defend at all points wise for those first handful of months of the season. And I feel like if you have been watching her over the past few months, she's building steadily, getting stronger and stronger. I thought she played well at the National Bank Open, lost to a tough opponent. Same scenario at the U.S. Open, like gets a couple wins before running into a player who's just a little too good on that day. And she's had some tough draws, losing to players like Pegula just the other week in Guadalajara, Belinda Bencic, like facing some great opponents. That's where I think she'd do well to get back in sort of a seeded category. Same scenario for Leylah, because she lost all her U.S. Open finals points, obviously. So they both dropped a bit. I'm going to pick Bianca as having a slightly better chance, just because I see the form a little bit more right now, and she'll have so many chances for points in the first 4 months of the year.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Leylah had a title in Mexico earlier
this
year.
Yeah,
so
Monterrey.
So she'll have those points to defend as well. Yeah, that's my biggest thing when I'm looking at these two. Bianca doesn't have those points to defend, so I feel like it'll give her a bigger boost to start the year for sure. And yeah, I've always been on the Bianca Andreescu train.
Okay.
Like, oh my God, I just love her game so much. The way she's able to adapt in game against her opponents, I think, is probably one of her biggest weapons, and what makes her so successful. So I'm just really excited to see her get back to that level again. And yeah, and when she returned this year in May, like she was against opponents like Sabalenka. I think she played really well against her, even if it was I think it was a loss early on, but it showed flashes of what she was, and I think if she can even improve anymore. I know she also split with her coach, so it's kind of
she did with Sven Gronfeld just recently. So.
Yeah, so it's a weird time, I guess, to be a player and coaches and splitting and all of that, but 2023, I think it'll be the year of Bianca for her to come back. Maybe, be Well, actually, no. I guess Felix is playing some of the best tennis of his life right now, but she can be Canadian number 2. I can see it happening.
She'd be a very strong Canadian number 2. I think we have I mean, this is the strongest crop of Canadians I think we've had. And for Layla and Bianca right now, for me, like their current rankings are not necessarily reflective of their talent and skill level. Like I think a safe prediction for me would be they're both getting back inside the top 25, top 20, and definitely one of them could contend and get into the WTA finals next year for sure.
Definitely agree, and we're so excited for the WTA finals, which begins on Monday, and I think the final will be played on November 6 or 7, which is going to be a very eventful week of tennis. I'm going to be so excited to see women's tennis on television because that's really what I want in life. Yeah. That's all you need in life, women's tennis on television. But thank you so much for joining me here today, Ben. Make sure you're following him on all social media. You're subscribed to Match Point Canada. I'll have that all in the description below. And thanks for joining me on Court Time.
Thanks so much for having me.